Hey, good evening. Back with another video. So it's 10:28 p.m. It is April 28th, Friday evening, and I'm at it again. Oh, you're probably wondering, what is she at it again? I've been painting flower pots, and when I was off from work, I was painting flower pots, and I love doing it. So I thought, you know what, tonight I got here and took a shower, and I started relaxing. I saw these flower pots that I bought in the corner, and I said, I just can't wait to paint them. I just started painting them. But you know what? It's good to stay busy, right? So a few nights ago, I was, looking on my tablet. I was reading, and these movies came up. And it's like this article about, some of the most horrible, like, gorish movies, right? And I kept thinking, okay, so what is their opinion, Because I'm bored, I've got nothing to do, right? So I looked at this article. So there was this one movie that was mentioned, and the movie's name is Martyr. And it came out in 2008. And, I don't like gore, I do not like violence at all, okay? But the idea of the movie is, of course, what a martyr is somebody who dies for a particular purpose. The idea of this movie is that people who get tortured to death basically could be considered martyrs, and there's like this institution that studies this in this movie, to where they inflict like horrible torture on people to get to the point of, like, I don't know what you call it, maybe like a state of ecstasy before they die, to see if they cross over to the other side. So, this part of it, because anything that relates to paranormal or research into life after death is very interesting to me. Plus, I kept thinking, okay, I don't like the idea of torture, but I do find it interesting to see, what is it, what's the story behind this movie. So I ended up watching it, right? So after that, I was looking at people's opinion on the movie, and then, when you do these Google searches or whatever, these other stories pop up. So I noticed a story about a woman who was torturing her kid, and this is not uncommon. People torture their kids a lot, and a lot of times people ignore this sort of behavior. But this little boy was so adorable. Like, I think Mexican kids are very cute anyway, right? This kid had, like, little round face, big brown eyes, and I don't know what in the world got into this woman and her boyfriend, but they, started lighting him, putting their cigarettes out on him, hitting him, bashing him, beating him, and they bludgeoned him to death. And, I don't know what happened to the mother. Obviously, she was arrested or whatever, and I know that there's a lot of people in prison who have experienced abuse themselves, and they are just looking for people who abuse children as an excuse to literally tear them to shreds. And, I don't wish harm on anybody, okay? But you do that kind of stuff to kids, you deserve it. You really do deserve it, in the worst possible manner ever. And I don't really have any remorse for these people. And it really, I'm very sensitive to the cruelty that goes on in the world, and especially now. I mean, I feel as though what happened in my life was an extreme act of cruelty. Maybe not the physical part, okay? But, the financial abuse, the being bullied, blah, 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 the community, whatever, all of that stuff. It's extremely abusive to a human being. But I'm very, very sensitive to it. And so, you think about how a lot of times, I call it living in, like, under Sesame Street programming. And the reason why I call it Sesame Street programming is because, when you're younger, you see these TV programs. And really what I think when they call these shows programming is, it literally is trying to program people to think or, grasp certain ideas or concepts, or encourage them, motivate them into a certain direction, okay? Influence them, So, but, I know that a lot of shows and TV shows, or, just even lessons in school, stories, whatever, they tend to always make things seem very filled with love. They always depict families in loving situations. Now things have changed. I mean, I would say, comparing and contrasting certain TV shows that I used to watch when I was a kid. Like I mentioned the Brady Bunch as a kid. I mean, that I watched several times. I used to watch that show. I mean, I could seriously tell you every episode, and I'm like the biggest Brady trivia master ever. Okay, not exactly proud of it, but you know what? It is what it is. But that show was just all about love, love, love. And then we had shows like Married with Children, which kind of showed the dysfunctional side of family. But there are families that literally abuse their children, and sometimes the signs are, really obvious, and sometimes they're very, very subtle. Sometimes when you see kids who aren't really taken care of, you can tell, okay? And we tend to ignore these sort of things, and we tend to ignore abuse in society in general, And I know, even now, believe me, I am extremely compassionate. I'm very sensitive to suffering. I cannot stand suffering at all, But even me, okay, we become a little bit more desensitized to suffering. When I was a kid, I used to get really emotional when I would see a TV show. I've mentioned before that I saw Snoopy Come Home when I was a child. Okay, that's really silly, right? But still, as a little kid, thinking about somebody saying goodbye to someone that they love and going away, and it made me cry, And other TV shows where maybe a character's mom died, that was very heartbreaking for me, and it would affect me long after I've watched the TV show, because it would put me in a sad mood. It would make me think about people losing their moms. This is how it used to affect me. And I remember, when I was a teenager, I had never seen a homeless person before, and then my dad brought this little Mexican man home one time that was homeless, and he was trying to sell my dad a transistor radio, to get back on his way or whatever. And I just kept thinking, why can't he just come live with us? And that's really silly and very simplistic as a kid. As an adult, I understand why you can't just bring people in your house and expect to take care of them, But I always had I've always felt sorry for people. And that was my biggest downfall in some ways, because a lot of times when people are bullied, they're the people who are some of the nicest people. And I'm not saying I pat myself on the back and I'm a nice person, but I am a passionate person. I think growing up, my siblings looked at that as weakness. And, I was different. I was more, empathetic, emotional, somebody who could, have compassion and was sensitive, So I'm hoping that people, and I know I can't change, the world, okay? And I'm not a political person, even though I understand politics very well, and I do everything I can to stay out of it, okay? And I have spiritual reasons for that, and I will probably go into that if I ever even decide to think, to pick up my YouTube channel because of being blacklisted and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, but I believe that the world is meant to be suffering. We're meant to be here as a form of hell, and we have to find our way out of it, or try to find some way to lessen the misery that's around it. But I don't believe that we can put our faith in other people to do it. We have to have this intense mindset to get through the labyrinth of what I consider to be a torturous place. There is all kinds of suffering that goes on in the world. And the sad part is that everybody is naturally inclined to look out for their own interest, and even though we would like to think that our quote-unquote loved ones are there to care and protect us, sometimes these people who are our own blood, are of our own bloodline, are the ones who betray us and the ones who abuse us the most. And not everybody looks at, family ties as something sacred or something that you're supposed to uphold, or that you naturally feel love for, whether that be a child that you give birth to or whatever. I remember growing up and my mother saying extremely abusive things to me. Like, I remember, it was kind of funny, really. Like, but I understand that, sometimes people, there some ignorant people do things that can affect a person for a very, very long time. There was this movie that I watched when I was a kid, and it was like, I'm sure people have watched it before. It's called Sybil. Okay, it's about this lady who, it's a true story, but of course they embellished the truth for the movie, right? But she had multi-personality disorder, and because she had received a lot of trauma and abuse from her family. And her mother particularly. Her mother was just like really crazy. She would give her enemas and, force her to hold it for long periods of time, knowing a little kid can't do that. And then of course if she let her water out, she's going to get a beating, right? This ridiculous stuff, I would even categorize it under it as like ritual abuse. I would consider it in that category. Anyway, so there was a scene in the movie where the kid was in a like a buggy or whatever, and the buggy gets pushed over a cliff. Okay, and my mom said, "Oh, I should have done that to you." Now that's a fucked up thing to say to a little kid. That's a really fucked up thing to say to a little kid. But there's a lot of pressure that goes on in families, and then, like I said, not all families are warm, welcoming. They're not all beaming with happiness when that child is born. Some people are pissed off, and the only thing that kid can do to that kid, for that person, is be like a tax write-off or something. This is the way it is. Okay, not everybody loves in this world. And so, I think of like happy-go-lucky type sayings like, love makes the world go round. Okay, if you look at love, there's different kinds of love. There's that platonic love, like friendship, right, which is rare, okay, because people will stab you in the back. We have paternal love, the kind of love that, your parents or whatever. And of course we have sexual love. I would say sexual love does make the world go around, because if people didn't have sex, we could not populate the planet. But love, as far as this idea of brotherhood and people coming together and really showing love for one and care for one another, that is very, very rare. Okay, and I know people want to promote it and people want to live in this like fantasy where this is how it is, but obviously if you want to believe that, I'm going to tell you, you can look around and see that it's not. Okay, look at the homeless people. I'm sure they have relatives, and maybe their relatives are driving by watching them be homeless and doing absolutely nothing about it. Why? Because we live in a very cruel world. Very cruel. And so the only thing that we can do for ourselves is look after ourselves. This is the way I believe it, because, and as much as I'm going to say it, okay, I'm just saying is people have to be reserved in their love. Like, they can't just like think that they can just give out love just because people will exploit that love. They will misuse you, they will abuse you in any way they possibly can. And don't think that just because that person has the same blood running through their veins that they're not going to do it. In fact, they're going to use that opportunity to really take advantage of you just because of that blood type. When it comes to love, use discretion. And I think that love should be, reserved, like for certain individuals who deserve it. Now, like for example, when you care about somebody, you should put them on a pedestal. Like my son, like I let my son borrow money or whatever, stuff like that. I give him certain privileges that I don't give anyone else. Because if I was to sit here and do the same things that I do for my son, right, and do the same things for somebody who I don't care as much for, well then what special privilege do I have to give to the person that really matters to me. You know what I mean? I think that we, as humans are open to the idea of Sesame Street programming because it does ease the tension. It gives us this idea of a false sense of security, kind of. We think that the majority of people are good. This to me, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I will say that in this situation, I look at it also as a form of a scientific study or social study, something along those lines, where you can use this example to show that they're not. They're not. We live in a very topsy-turvy world where right is wrong and wrong is right. Where, people enact all kinds of evil and they don't seem to even realize that it's evil, because this is the sort of low standard that the majority of people live in. They don't have an understanding of laws. They don't have an understanding of human rights. And they think that they do. They think silly things like, that they believe things like, for example, they're not a racist, right? They're not a racist. They have black friends, they whatever, okay? But yeah, they'll do things and say things that say the opposite or show the opposite or do the whatever. You know what I mean? It's like we have this dualistic mindset, I was thinking, like, when I was making my videos on my other channel, where, I was leaving my ex-husband because his family was incestuous, and said it many times before. Screaming, scared, terrified, worried. I felt like I was running for my life and had no place to go. And then I find out my ex-family, blood relations, are incestuous as well. And people still wanted me to be with this person. Now, like I said, here we go. We either have ignorant people or we have evil people. Either way, I think the world is not safe. So we always have to look out for ourselves, and we have to speak out for ourselves. And this, I understand the majority of people are not going to do it, and I'm not somebody who expects other people to do it for me, because most people don't understand certain things that go on in the world that might be being played out in their face. Like, for example, I understand that even though this issue happened here in this community, it's not going to lessen the other people who are dealing with issues of human trafficking. Kern County has a huge human trafficking problem. And there are women who are literally trying to find shelter, to be safe. Now, I'm not saying that this is the reason why a person has to hire a person. I would not say that, okay? But if somebody thinks that they can have the right to put something in place when a person is in need of employment, when they have the right to have employment, okay? Maybe they don't have to be some top level executive or whatever, but they still have the right to work maybe in an office or something that's smaller than that. They still have the right to have an income, you see? And this sort of stuff happens all the time. And the people who are giving the fake job interviews or whatever, and I'm not bringing up this issue to, take a jab at any particular person, because I really don't want to mention these people ever again. Okay? But my point is that this sort of stuff needs to stop. But I can't stop it. And I don't believe that one person can stop it. But for people these rare individuals out there, who are able to feel empathy, who don't like seeing people get tortured, whether that be people being physically tortured, sexually tortured, financially tortured, emotionally tortured, whatever, on whatever level, somebody who doesn't, and I like I said there, I know they're rare, but for those people who can be some form of light, please think about it and be there. You know what I mean? I understand we live in a very selfish world. I understand there's all kinds of suffering, but my God, I'm going to tell you right now, I would never let anyone suffer. So I'm going to wrap up this video. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.